Tim.
And he's back.
Hey,
Oh, so good
mate.
to be sitting here in my favorite little seat.
Yay. Your conservatory must feel loved these days.
Seat. It's usually ignored during the winter time because it's just cold. But it's it's a good
Yeah.
place to be.
Indeed, indeed. Any updates on the family?
Talking of good place to be, Elspeth finished her humanitarian and she is currently in a very good place to be. She's in France skiing for a week with her brother. So,
Ooh,
yeah,
fancy.
they're having fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yay. Cool. Okay. Well, we have quite a canter here. We'll be starting in Luke 5:17. 17. Have you got anything from 17 till
Yeah,
I've
no,
got some?
yeah. So I started 22, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just in passing. Jesus knew what they were thinking and asked, "Why are you thinking these things in your hearts?" And I'm now thinking, did the teachers of the law not find it a little bit unnerving that he was able to speak out exactly what they're thinking? Did they not reckon, this guy's special and just
Well,
weird?
I've definitely had moments where I'm talking to someone and they'll say something and you can hear, you can in your knower, you can sense that they're thinking a certain thing. And I'll say to them, "You're thinking this." And I can be right. Not
Yeah,
like all the time, I'm not actually really knowing. I'm just sensing what they're thinking. Whereas it says Jesus knew what they were thinking. And the Lord probably told him, said this person is thinking this, that person is thinking this, or the chatter. Like, I don't know how that works, but it is unnerving. It is sort of because sometimes you can sit there and even if you don't say anything out loud, your
yeah.
face or your posture can belie your opinion. And then you kind of are like, oops, I'm talking too loud with my face. Anyway. I did underline verse 24. So I will prove to you that the Son of Man has the authority on earth to forgive sins. Then Jesus turned to the paralyzed man and said to him, "Stand up, pick up your mat, and go home." And I looked this up, and it might be later on in Luke that we need to know this, but Jesus healed on the Sabbath 7 times. Isn't that funny?
Seven,
Seven
the
times.
biblical
Seven.
number of completion.
Exactly. 7 times on the Sabbath, he was like, "Hey, mate, go pound sand, Pharisees, because you help people." You don't get into, well, should he be picking up his mat on the Sabbath? You don't get into that. You just heal people.
27 and 28, a wee bit in that one. After this, Jesus goes out, sees a tax collector by the name of Levi. "Follow me." He gets up and he leaves everything. Now, we know him as Matthew. Matthew is the Greek name and Levi is the Hebrew name. It's the same person. As a tax collector, Matthew gathered taxes for the Greek speaking Romans. Plot spoiler, the Romans didn't just speak Latin. Greek was the international language from the Greek Empire. So they all spoke Greek as well, or it was easier almost. So he gathered taxes for the Greek speaking Romans, and he gathered them from the Hebrew speaking Hebrews, the Jews. So of course they would call him by both names. It's like in the French name for Stephen is Etienne. It's a totally different name, and yet it's the same name. So just thought that.
Yeah,
Um,
no, it's interesting. And did you know, I looked this up as well, that there are 7 name changes. And this Levi and Matthew is not counted as a name change because it's just his name in a different language. But where Peter becomes, or Simon becomes Simon Peter, or Simon Peter as he's referred to, as you, because they were confused in the middle of it's like, okay, I know you as Tim, and all of a sudden I'm going to call you, Bartholomew or something. It's sort of weird. And so, in terms of that, there were 7 name changes in the Bible as well,
did not know that. That's
right? I
funny,
do
fun.
I do have 30
No, no,
5.
no, no, no. Oh, no, no,
Oh, you
no.
got
We're
more?
not finished with 27 and
Okay.
28. There's
Tell
so
me. Tell
much.
me.
The stuff that you read this, Jesus went out and saw a tax collector. Now, in the original New Testament, in the Greek language, this word was eido. And eido is
Mhm.
not just seeing with your eyes, it is seeing and knowing with your spiritual sight. So
Okay.
Jesus didn't just see Matthew, he really sees him. And the same idea is when disciple Nathaniel and Jesus said, well, Nathaniel says to Jesus, "How do you know me?" And Nathaniel asked, and Jesus answered, "I saw you while you were sitting under the fig tree." He didn't just clock him and say, "All right, there's somebody sitting there." He saw into him, he saw his character, he saw his spirit. So that's the Ado
Well,
bit.
and the Chosen does a good job of this. When Nathaniel was sitting under the tree, Jesus didn't actually see him with his eyes. So
Yeah.
he gets his buddy comes. Is it Philip? I think it's Philip that
Yes,
goes and
yes.
gets him and sort of says, "Hey, come, we found the Messiah. Come and meet him. Come and see." And that's when Jesus says to Nathaniel something like a righteous Israelite or something. And Nathaniel says, "How did you see me?" Right? Like you just talked about. And yet he didn't actually physically see with his eyes. He saw, and let's call it, he saw with his knower, like
Yes.
inside of
Yeah.
himself, in his spirit, he saw it.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. And my last point on these two verses, in 28, Levi got up, left everything, and followed him immediately. Not after he'd secured his pension, washed the dishes, made a to-do list, whatever else. He was like, I'm being called, I'm there. Loved it.
Yeah. He just come.
Yeah.
I'm going, yes, Lord.
Yeah.
And he comes. Although what's funny about that is later on they do have, and I'm not sure what verse this is, but it does talk about them being at Matthew's house. And so I don't think he left it to become a vacant lot. Like
No.
there was a point at where things are sorted out, but it's the action of immediately following the Lord. And again, the Chosen, when Simon Peter goes off to follow him, it's Zebedee that says, "Don't worry, mate, I'll handle the fish. I'll handle like taking care of all this stuff and
Yeah.
picking up after." But it's not a well, if you're gonna be a slacker, I'm gonna have to pick up after you. It's like, no, go. You're following the Lord. Like I get it. I'll sort the rest of this for you. And it's okay. And it's not a matter of, because when we get to 2 Samuel, I believe today, don't quote me, it gets all a little bit muddled in my brain sometimes, especially with the back and forth between Kings, Chronicles, and Samuel. And then you're like, wait, didn't I read this before? Yes, I did, except I read it in a different book. But Elijah, when he's called, Elisha, and actually I need to make a note. I think last week talking to Jill, I said Elisha when I meant Elijah, but it gets very confusing. So if I said that wrong, apologies, correcting myself. But anyway, when Elijah calls Elisha, then he says, "Hey, let me say goodbye to my mom and dad." And he's not saying, "Oh, I need to go do some stuff." He's like, "I'm never coming back here. This will be completely finished, line in the sand." And Elijah says an interesting thing to him, and we'll save that for when we get there. But it's an interesting one. It's all about what you just said. When the
Mm,
Lord calls you, you answer and you go and you do. You don't look back. You don't turn into a pillar of salt by looking backward. Anyway.
indeed.
So, I just loved in 30, I don't have anything significant here other than the fact that today I've come with NLT. So this is the phrase for phrase translation. And I just
Mhm.
loved the second part of 30. The Pharisees are complaining. It says, "Why do you eat and drink with such scum?" I just loved the modern language in that. And truly, sometimes that modern language can be so helpful to us because it is really adding a modern, like that's what they're saying. These people are scum. And I don't, what does your version say? Do you know?
I'm on NLT as well.
Okay.
So we have
Funny.
a
Okay.
concordance.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Anyway, it's interesting to me that sometimes I feel the modern language goes a little bit too far, and sometimes this is perfect. Like, yes, it absolutely illuminates what's going on here and the attitudes of the people better than translation of the phrase, but it gives you more insight, I feel like. So
Yeah.
again, I think we need both. What Bible should you read? Two of them, so you have two different perspectives.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And on that, NIV says, why do you eat and drink with such tax collectors and sinners?
okay. So, but a tax collector for them was Levi.
Yeah.
Matthew was the scum of the earth because he's exploiting his own people and helping the Romans.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Alrighty, I have a little note in 39 before we move to chapter 6. Do you have anything?
Nope.
Okay, so in 39, but no one who drinks the old wine seems to want the new wine. The old is just fine, they say. And for me, and I'm not directing this at you, Tim, in any way, but and we obviously have differing eschatology, which is totally fine because that's just details. It's not about whether we believe that Jesus Christ is our savior or not. And
Mm.
yet I feel like this speaks to that in the sense, and like I said, not at you, because you and I've had longer, deeper conversations about this and have a differing of opinion, which is great. And Yet you and I, brother and sister, love one another, don't have any argument, don't need to argue about it. We're happily discussing Bible geekery facts. But for me, this verse kind of says there are people that are not willing to look at new ideas or new approaches. It's like, no, I know what I know. I'm not even willing to entertain it. And that to me is the tragedy. That's the part where it's like, well, okay, just because you've been taught this doesn't mean that there isn't something more. And there have been plenty of ideas that have been brought to me by other people. And I've said, okay, I've looked at verses, I've dug through this. I can't go there with you. But I've at least entertained it, at least opened my eyes and said, okay, could this be the perspective? Is this a perspective that I need to take on or not? And so here, Jesus is basically saying that it's don't just be a curmudgeon and stuck in your ways because it's what you were taught. I just feel like this is a really good 39 is like, okay, really dig in, really search it out. I was just going to echo 6:8. You already touched on this, but Jesus knew their thoughts. So it says it again. It's not just once, saying it twice. And I think it does say it a third time somewhere. He knew their thoughts. So exactly what we brought up earlier. He knows what they're thinking. And then I loved, it says in 6:10, he looked around at them one by one and then said to the man, hold on. So he must have, Jesus, been very and pointedly and knowing it's the Sabbath, right? He
Yeah.
must have had a pretty strong spine and been like, hold out your hand and kaboom, right? Like he must have done that in a like, I know what day it is. I know what you're thinking. I know and looked at each one by
Yeah.
one, right? And so it probably was kind of a little bit more dun 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 than we think of.
Yeah. And respect to the man as well with the withered hand, because he could have said, oh, no, not the Sabbath. I'm conforming to the law. I'm stepping back from here. But he was saying, what do I want first? I want God's compassionate healing, and then the Sabbath could look after the Sabbath. So good on him, but good on Jesus more.
Right. And you had something you said in 37?
Yeah. Oh, geekery alert. 37. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. There's a no. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. There's another no. And then the do thing. Do forgive, and you will be forgiven. Now, this is obviously in English, so of course I'm going to go back to Old English and look what the Anglo-Saxon said. The for is not a preposition as in to go for a walk. The for in forgiven is overwhelming force. It's where the word force comes from. It's an utter compelling power. And the gifen means to give. So in Old English, we for this absolutely compelling giving. We utterly give. So when you forgive, you are giving fully and completely your pardon.
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. Forcefully giving, like imploring but forgiveness,
Yeah. So
meaning recovering.
you're not just giving a little bit of forgiveness, but holding back a little bit of bitterness with it. If you forgive completely.
Well, and we often don't do that, right? It's like, okay, I forgive. And then you move on. And then the bitterness sort of creeps in and you think of
Yeah.
something and it rings in your brain and you have to go, no, I've forgiven that. I forgive it again. If you, I had a friend who's not a believer recently asked me about a biblical concept. And I was trying to explain it to her in the best normal vernacular that I could, because we do have a lot of Christianese words and things, but it's picking something back up from the altar that you've put down. So if we have brought something to God, I've forgiven my auntie for seeming to have wrecked my wedding, right? Because she made a ruckus. So if you have said those words, I forgive my aunt, da 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 da, and then then again, but she did this. If that thought occurs to you, you have picked back up that
Yeah.
anger. And so just like you're saying in the Anglo-Saxon, like forcefully forgiving. And here's the thing, people have suffered horrible things at the hands of some, children that have been abused or things like this. And no one asks you to forget, as in go back into relationship with someone, if that's not possible or it's even dangerous for you to do. Nobody's saying that, but you do have to still forgive. And that's where that little line is. Nobody's saying that you should put yourself in a dangerous situation, but that you do have to work on your own heart and your own attitudes. Like you said, there's a no, and then there's a do.
Yeah, and just to drill down on the point with that, the for and the completely and utterly, when Jesus is on the cross and he cries out, "Father, Father, why have you forsaken me?" Again, forsaka is the Anglo-Saxon, and it means saka is a distance created by law, and for is this overwhelming. So, why have you forsaken me is not why have you turned your back on me, why have you run away? It's why is the law created this overwhelming gap between us?
Fascinating and important. Because we often think of those words as, why are you turning your back on me? When you first read that, why have you forsaken? Forsaken in our language and in our understanding is instantaneously like, I'm done with you. And yet talking about the law and how the law created, well, it says that without the law we wouldn't know what sin is.
Yeah. And going into the story of Esther, forgot his name, the bad dude, uh,
Haman.
Haman, thank you. Haman rushes on, and when the king realizes what's happened, they put a veil, a cloth over Haman's head to say, "You are no longer part of humanity. You've got the death penalty." And again, it's this forsaken. There is a distance. It has been created by the law.
Well, and I like, especially that you just brought up Esther, because Esther says to the king, reverse the law. And he's like, sorry, these
Yeah,
laws are immutable, and therefore you can make a law to correct it, but you can't revoke it. And we often, again, from especially an American perspective, think we have an amendment that was repealed, and we think, oh, you can change them. If you look at the Bible and the fall that Adam and Eve, the creation, the fall that happened to creation and the separation needed to be fixed, corrected, but
yeah.
not taken back. It had to be covered by the blood of Christ. I do have one little note before we move on to 7. I love this in 32. If you love only those who love you, why should you get credit for that? Even sinners love those who love them. And I just thought that was, it's a pretty rounded concept in the Gospels, in the New Testament, but it is profound. And Jesus is suggesting things that are so foreign to them, like forgiving in 7 times and to love your enemy. And you kind of go, well, wait a minute, what? Like, you want me to love somebody that what? And yet that's that 32 is the truth of that. It's like the demons know who Jesus is, they shudder at him, but they acknowledge and know him, and we just kind of think, oh yeah, Satan's just this red-horned, he's not really an actual threat. And I think oftentimes we underestimate Satan's desire to thwart, hurt those of us who have God's favor because we have the covering and grace of Christ.
Yeah, good point.
All right, moving on to 7.
Okay, so Luke 7:47 says, "Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love is shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little." Same point I made before. If you forgive little, it's not real forgiveness. If you got to forgive, go large.
Ha, love it. Love it. In 8, I'm on 25. Do you have anything before that?
16. No one lights a lamp, hides it under a clay jar, or puts it under a bed. Instead, they put it on a stand so those who can come in and can see the light. Long story short, in my legal career, when I was in private practice as a lawyer, I turned down the offer of being a partner twice because it is not my driver. I was just more interested in, is my team happy? Are the clients well represented? That's all I bothered about. And my senior partner, she she said, she quoted this verse at me, and she said, "You've got gifts and skills as a lawyer. As what are you going to do with them? Are you going to hide them under your desk, basically? Use them and use those skills in the partnership model for developing the clients, for bringing on your team." So shout out to Penelope, my old boss.
That's beautiful. That's saying, "Hey, you got skills, mate, use them." Yeah, that's cool. And you weren't necessarily not trying to use your skills, you were just focused
Yeah,
on the right thing.
I didn't want the self-aggrandizement. And she was saying it's not about that. It's about how best can you serve your team? How best can you serve your clients?
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
in go ahead. Go ahead.
28.
I have 25.
Okay, go for it. Go
So,
for it.
well, it's simply so they've seen Jesus raise people from the dead, and maybe like I'd have to do a little bit more digging in terms of timelines. Was it just James, Peter, James, and John that saw the little girl raised? And so timelines, where are we? But I love this. The disciples were terrified. He basically stills the wind and the waves, and these are fishermen. Maybe Levi might not, or Matthew might not have known what the heck was going on in the boat. Like a bunch of them are fishermen. Like they've been on the Sea of Galilee. This is not any sort of thing where they would have been extra concerned because they've been out in storms before. And yet they are freaking out because all of them are. And then it says, "Who is this man?" they asked each other. "When he gives a command, even the wind and the waves obey him." And we often think of an incarnate Jesus as what the modern world calls buddy Jesus. This kind of he's all just lovey-dovey and ushy-gushy. And
Yeah.
Christ, in his power, could speak to the wind and the waves and say, "Be still." And they were freaked out by that. And so I just kind of, again, it's hard for us as humans to sort of grasp that. And yet, if you had been in his presence, you'd have been like, "Whoa, shut in my mouth. Oh my goodness." Like you'd have been like, yikes.
Yeah.
And they were. And then it's powerful.
Completely. Which is a great segue into 28. Um, when the demon infested man saw Jesus, he cried out, fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" So even the demons recognize him, but us
Yep.
humans, we seem to have a problem with it.
Right? Exactly. It's like, yeah, totally. Move over to the Old Testament, unless you have something else before the end of it.
Hey, nope, we're good.
So we'll move over to Second Samuel. We just have chapters 2 and 3. Um, Basically, David, the first part of this, and we have a little section about Joab, kind of a naughty one. This is where Joab goes wrong. But we have David learning about Saul and Jonathan's death. And what I found powerful about this, which is just a little bit of an overarching thing, not a specific verse, is he and Jonathan, they were bros. Souls were knitted together. They were
Yeah.
besties. But he continuously says Saul and Jonathan, Jonathan and Saul. He doesn't leave Saul out of it. And oftentimes when David had the opportunity to kill Saul, he talks about him, "My father," right? So, but he doesn't make any distinction. It's not just, "Oh my gosh, Jonathan's dead." It's Saul and Jonathan.
Yeah. Ah, interesting point. In verse what, 14 and 15. So in there, David could have killed Saul many times, but he was conscious that for all Saul's failings, he had been the Lord's anointed before he went off the rails. So it was for the Lord to secure the succession, not for David or anyone to intervene. And it just comes across it to me in the reading of it that David was astonished that anyone would dare to intervene with the Lord's plan.
Yeah. He basically says to that Amalekite, like, "You've condemned yourself." Here is a shout out to, and we haven't read this, which is fine. Again, we've read some extra biblical stuff, Apocrypha, even Second Esdras. And here is the notation of the book of Jasher. So I think it's worth digging into those things out of curiosity and interest because it talks about it here. So here in what we consider canon, it mentions the book of Jasher. So I thought, okay, well, I have not personally read the book of Jasher. This book of Enoch that I think I got a copy of. Jasher, I don't think I have one yet. But anyway, I just thought it was sort of interesting. It's like, okay, maybe it's worth looking at.
Yeah, yeah. And
And then
in
in, go ahead.
verse 19, just briefly, it's the comment, "How the mighty have fallen." It's yet another of one of those many famous phrases which are found in the Bible.
I will. I was actually going to go there. That's so funny because
Really?
it says it in 19, it says it in 25, and it says it in 27. And when the Bible says things 3 times, pay attention.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And then in 2, I did a little bit of looking and digging around Jabesh Gilead
Uh-huh.
because here, So the men of Jabesh Gilead, when we eventually get to Judges, there's a whole thing with a spoiler alert, especially with the reading backwards, so it doesn't really matter. But there's a whole thing about a Benjaminite and a concubine, and it gets a little spicy. But at one point they say, who didn't come to this assembly? And it's the men of Jabesh Gilead.
It's them. Yeah, they didn't turn up.
Right. And so here they go out extra. And it is when Saul also, he helps them. And so they've been extra true, faithful to Saul. And David acknowledges the fact that they went and got their bodies and were respectful and whatnot. It's kind of a good one.
So their later deeds have redeemed their earlier inaction.
Exactly. So Joab, and this is where he goes wrong, and oh so wrong. Basically, Abner, the commander of Saul's army, kills his brother Asahel. And he does stop. So this is in 2:26. Abner shouted at Joab, "Must we always be killing each other? Don't you realize that bitterness is the only result? When will you call off your men from chasing their Israelite brothers?" And Joab does. And he says, okay, fine. But Joab does not forgive, does not let that go. And then later on there's a whole thing here that Joab kills Abner, and he does it in an underhanded, in a seedy way. And for me, the reason that this is so intriguing and interesting is that later on, when Absalom's rebellion happens with David and Joab rebukes David, David had to be like, hypocrite. You're gonna tell me how to deal with the death of my son when you couldn't even handle the death of your brother? And yet that none of that is talked about at that particular time. None of it is said. It just says, and here's the thing. In that instance, Joab is right about how David is handling Absalom. And even when David calls for the census, Joab's like, what the heck are you doing? Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do this. And David's like, no, no, no. And in one place it says that the Lord incited him to do it. And another, it just says that he did it. So it's like, is which one? And again, that's from a priestly perspective versus a kingly perspective, which is what First and Second Kings do versus what First and Second Chronicles do. Then there's a verse where David talks about, and these are his nephews. So Asahel is his nephew that has died, but he talks about them, the sons of Zeruiah. And at one point he says, they're so strong, I can't control them because there's three of them and one of me. And he basically says, my nephews are jerks. I just love that. Anyway.
Yeah. We're on into 2 Samuel 3, right at verse 1. And again, just little reminders, the war between the house of Saul and the house of David lasted a long time. It's just a reminder that David was not uncontested king just as soon as Saul was killed. The Lord had said, David is my anointed one, he will be king. But he didn't say, and he's going to be king and it's all going to be dead smooth. Don't you worry, it's all relaxing. You still have to struggle for that which is worth struggling for.
Absolutely. And it's messy because it involves humans.
Yes. 1 Kings 12, 1 to 11. It reads to me as just a bunch of adolescent delinquents who are just throwing their weight around and thinking that they are untouchable. As my brother says, I'm immortal until the day I die. They just don't think what they're doing.
And it's arrogance.
Yes.
It's total arrogance, as opposed to stop and consider some wisdom of someone who's been before you. Throughout the Bible, the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, is mentioned between 19 and 20 times. And these right here in 1 Kings 12, these are the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. And he ordains priests from the common people. He builds golden calves, which had to have been, the Lord must have been like, are you kidding me? This again? Yeah. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Like, really? Really? This is what you're going to do?
Well for Aaron, so you too? Right. Come on.
Yeah, why not? And then the other thing is he imitates festivals at the same time. And I will say in verse 26, Jeroboam thought to himself, unless I am careful, the kingdom will return to the dynasty of David. In a worldly sense, pretty clever actions there, dude. In a worldly sense, like, yeah. But all he does is lead Israel away from God. And it's all about self-importance. And if I don't maintain my kingship, me, I, my,
Yeah.
then, and these are the sins, and this is then repeated 19 to 20 more times the rest of the Bible. And whatever king it is, and led Israel away like the sins of Jeroboam son of Nebat. So here is literally, don't do any of this.
Okay, so that the man of God said, I cannot turn back and go with you, nor can I eat bread or drink water with you in this place. He gives all the excuses about, well, not excuses, that's the story of what he should be doing. And then the old prophet says, I'm the prophet as well. And the angel said to me this. On one sense, there is a quandary, a question. How do you know that somebody is a prophet and is speaking true or is just lying? Who do you trust? Maybe it's easy. Well, it is easy in retrospect. You look back and you're looking at discerning the word of the Lord, hear the clear message, and until the Lord says to you, stick with that first message. Now, again, this is in the retrospective scope. I don't know if I were the younger prophet, I would probably have agreed with him, but I got the younger prophet got this message of what he should do direct from the Lord. And then for somebody else to say, oh, I've got a prophecy about what you should do. Well, the Lord spoke to me in the first instance, so I think he's not being arrogant, but he's going to speak to me if there is something on that one.
Well, and it's super interesting to me that he's like, I can't eat or drink here. So he might have been hungry and thirsty, and he's on his way back. And it's like, oh, don't worry. Here's some comfort for you. Here you go. Come and have something to eat. Take a rest. Take your load off. It's all right. Everything will be good. And that's the part that was the deception is, hey, everything will be fine here. Don't worry.
Yeah.
You've done such a good job. And I love this, but the old man was lying to him, dude. And then it's even funnier if you carry on in this whole story. For me, 28. The donkey and the lion were still standing there beside it, the body, right? For the lion had not eaten the body nor attacked the donkey. So the old prophet that lied to the original prophet takes the body and puts it on if there's a lion standing there, don't you think you'd be a little bit like, right? But the lion and the donkey are standing there next to it, just like, hey, hanging out. Like, what? What? So weird. I don't know. But yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah. And actually, just as you say that, the first part, it does remind me the way the old prophet, so the younger prophet says, I cannot eat or drink here. I cannot rest. That's what God has said to me. And the old prophet says, just come back. It'll be fine. Don't you worry. There is a something about Eve and the serpent there. The serpent going, did he really say that? Did he
Mm-hmm.
really say you were going to die? Ah,
Fine. Don't worry
yeah.
about it. Just, yeah, it's all good. Go for it. Oof. And then in 1427, King Rehoboam later replaced the bronze shields with substitutes. So the gold shields that Solomon made become bronze. And it just kind of tells you you're stepping away further and further and further away. Even some of the kings, Josiah, Asa, Hezekiah, did serve the Lord. But here, all you're doing is replacing the good stuff with imitation. And it just doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Yep, I had exactly the same point. There's this sad decline from gold in the temples to silver to bronze in the guardhouse. Where's the respect? Where's the honor? And then in 18 and 19, Asa then took all the silver and gold that was left in the treasury at the Lord's temple and of his own palace, entrusted it to his officials. So he used it in the time of war and negotiations. He was trying to restore things, trying to get it back to where it had been.
Yeah. Where's your next thing?
Okay, so in their 31st year of Asa being king of Judah, Omri becomes the king of Israel. He reigns for 12 years, 6 of them in Tirzah. He bought the hill of Samaria from Shemer for 2 talents of silver, built a city in the hill, called it Samaria after Shemer, who he had bought it from. So the name of the former owner of the hill is commemorated as being the name of the hill. That's the origin of Samaria. Ultimately, the Samaritan woman at the well, she's from Samaria. The Good Samaritan, he is from Samaria. in the parable that Jesus told. And it all comes from this casual mention. So, oh yeah, he bought it for 2 talents of silver, bought the hill, named after the dude he bought it from. Anyway, moving on.
No, no, no. That's totally true. And names are interesting. I'll go one backwards just a little bit, but in 16:9, Zimri lasts 7 days. And later on, when Jehu and Jezebel are having their tit for tat kind of thing of where, and then the eunuchs throw her down, she calls out, and this is again subtleties and political intrigue. She's like, "Oh, Zimri." She calls Jehu, she mentions him and says, "You're a Zimri," because Zimri takes over and plots to kill Basha. And actually, then a whole other camp is for Omri, and Omri is Ahab's dad. Omri is the dad of Ahab, so Omri is her father-in-law, and so she's making this reference. But again, those are such subtleties that when you're reading through the Bible, and especially when you're reading at the pace that we are, meaning like the whole book in a year, it's so hard to capture all this because we have so many characters and so much going on that it's
Yeah.
super confusing.
Do you think there's an element in there that nowadays we look back in the Bible and think, who was the big bad evil dude that we can all say is like, oh, you Judas, you're just a Judas because you're a traitor, you betray people. Judas wasn't around then, so it was like, oh, you're just a Zimri.
Yeah, totally. And that's how they would have referenced it. And it made perfect sense for her to say that in that context. But that is essentially what it is. She's calling him a Judas.
Yeah.
In 17, just like you just mentioned about the Samaritan woman, what is ironic, if you will, about this whole story of Elijah and the widow of Zarephath. Zarephath is in Sidon. Jezebel is from Sidon. In fact, she's the king's daughter. She's a princess when she marries Ahab. But it is with this whole famine and all the things. What does the Lord tell Elijah to do? Go to Sidon where Baal is worshipped. And that is where he finds a widow that feeds him and is faithful to the Lord. Kind of, sort
Yeah.
of like typical the Lord doing it back to front, sort of on purpose. What is he doing? He's healing on the Sabbath because people have made the Sabbath be more than Jesus. And it's like, no, Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath. And if someone needs healing, it doesn't matter that it's the Sabbath. If he can't walk, then whether he's picked up a mat and walked 4 or 5 feet doesn't matter because he's healed. So again, here with the widow of Zarephath, what does the Lord do? The Lord sends Elijah to Sidon, to right into the heart of Baal worship country.
Yes. Of all the towns and all the bars and all the towns, you had to choose that one.
Exactly. Everything comes from the Bible, as Tyler says.
Yes. Okay.
What else?
Jumping on what Kings 18, 20 to 24.
Mm-hmm.
And in that one, Ahab sends word through the whole of Israel, gets together all the prophets of Mount Carmel. Elijah goes before the people and says, how long will you waver between these two opinions? If the Lord is Lord, follow him. If it's Baal, follow him. And then he says, but the people said nothing. So he's given them, there's your straight choice. And they're sort of, you could just see them staring at their feet and shuffling a bit. Don't pick on me, don't ask me or whatever.
Right.
And then Elijah says to them, I'm the only one of the prophets left. Baal's got 450 prophets. So this is what we're going to do. Get 2 bulls. And he lays down the whole challenge thing.
Mm-hmm.
The people are right into that. Say, what you say is good. What struck me was people will not look at the evidence of history and all around them. And instead, they just want a sign, a demonstration. Show me, give me the reality.
Because we're not willing to learn from what went before. It's pretty cool. And then we have this whole very, very famous passage in 1 King 19 after Elijah has, and I will highlight 1838. Fire from the Lord flashed down from heaven and burned up the young bull, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. Can you imagine standing there, right? And all of a sudden, like a fire, you just like the disciples with the whole be still to the wind and the waves, you'd have been like, gulp.
Yeah.
And when the people saw it, they fell face down. That is exactly how you're supposed to react. Fall on your face because, oh my goodness.
Just before that, when it's the Baal worshippers are trying to do their thing, and Elijah is taunting them, not out of being nasty. He just is so clear, so firm of what is going to happen, that the Lord is going to act on this one. That he does tell them, oh, shout louder. Surely he's a God. Perhaps he's in deep thought. I did a Beth on this one, and I started looking at all the different translations to see just what exactly does Elijah say. And in one translation, he says, surely he's God. Maybe he's deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he's sleeping and you need to wake him up. But NIV says he's deep in thought, busy, or traveling. The Amplified version says either he's occupied or he's out at the moment, or he's on a journey. So I've just popped out. The Contemporary English says, thou must be a God. Maybe he's daydreaming or using the toilet or traveling somewhere. And then from there, the translations get a bit
Okay.
course after that. The Tree of Life says, shout louder. After all, he is a God. Maybe he's deep in thought, or he's relieving himself. He's off on a journey. And then the ultimate is the voice, which says, Elijah says, you have to shout louder than that. The one to whom you cry out certainly must be a God. Maybe he's daydreaming or napping or away from his heavenly throne, so he's not sitting on the throne, relieving himself. He's like, no, just.
That's totally funny. That's hilarious. I would actually tell you that he's using sarcasm. He's totally like, he's full on into it, and he's mocking them because he knows who God is. And I don't think he doesn't hold back. He's just, and yet, as we get to 19, his reaction after he's done that, and he didn't do it, God did it. And he knows that, but he's just so spent that he says, I've had enough, Lord. And he's like, kill me now? Like, what? How do you go from mocking Baal, having the fire of God come down, and then the next moment, because Jezebel's after you, you're so freaked out that you're like, well, just kill me now? What? We weren't there. We weren't dealing with what Elijah's dealing with. And I'm sure that the pressure of all those situations, but it is amusing to me that in what you just talked about, like, Elijah doesn't hold back.
So I just want to touch on 1 Kings 18:46, which says that the power of the Lord came on Elijah, and tucking his cloak into a belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. This impacts me personally in a big way. 2 years ago, my best friend at the time developed MND, known as ALS in the States. Horrible disease. He was a non-believer. He was properly scared. He looked at so many different faiths, theories, philosophies, whatever. I spoke to him, as many others did, about Jesus. His sister phoned me and basically said, if you want to say your farewells, you need to come tonight. So I went along, and he was sitting in his chair, and there was this ragged cough rattle in his throat, basically the so-called death rattle. And I sat quietly. The rest of his family were at one end of the room. I said to him, what do you want? Hoping that he would say, I said, can I pray for you? What do you want? I'm hoping that he would say, go home and pray for me, because this was a bit scary for me. And he managed somehow with one hand to lift the other to here. And he said, and he managed to say, I want him here. I want Jesus here. So we prayed together, and he looked visibly relaxed. That was it. End of the evening, I drove home. And as I was driving home, I was thinking, I don't know why I'm driving. I could just be running, because I had this feeling that there was so much power in me that I would be faster running than I was driving. It's just incredible. The power of the Lord came on Elijah. I felt that power in me. Briefly, the end of, the next part of the story is the next morning his sister phoned me, and she said, the doctor's just been, do you need to come? So, okay, here we go. So I went, and I went to him expecting to see him laid out. And he was sitting up, and he said to me in a clear voice, he said, last night I was dying. However long I've got, I get to see with Jesus. And he lived for another 5 months. And in those
Wow.
5 months of really happy life, he reconciled with his ex-wife. He reestablished, got basically memories with his 4 children so that they remember their dad. He gave so much wisdom to his children. He gave memories to all of us, his friends. He just rounded his life off. And each time I went to see him, he would just have a wee twinkle. life's good with Jesus, and it's going to be even better. So all
Amen.
that to say, the power of the Lord is just incredible when it comes on you, the power to run, to move, whatever.
Well, you do think sort of like, wait, he's out running a horse. I mean, I have a horse. That's like, what? Like, no wonder the guy was tired after that. Righty. Well, we'll see you again then, Mr. Tim.
Yes, indeed. You've got lots of reading to do, and I've got lots of listening and watching to do.
Thanks, mate.
Okay. Bye.